It wasn't easy to be an anatomist in early 19th century Scotland. For one thing, the study was still in its early stages, and for another, despite there being plenty of deceased people, it was very difficult for a doctor to find one for dissection. Enter the resurrection men. Legally, disturbing a grave was a criminal offense, and so was taking the property from the deceased. But stealing the deceased themselves? That was legal as per Scottish law at the time because the body didn't actually belong to anyone. This led to a booming industry in the stealing of the newly deceased and selling them to anatomists for a tidy sum. However, William Burke and William Hare developed a much simpler method that cut out a lot of the dirty work of having to dig up graves. Welcome to Rayne's Astonishingly Curious Cases of Odd Notoriety. I'm Rayne Raccoon, and this is the place to listen to a raccoon tell you stories of the strange, the spooky, of forgotten places, of true crimes, and just all-around interesting tales. So let's get going. Edinburgh University in Scotland in the early 19th century was the place to be if you wanted to study anatomy. Several pioneering anatomy teachers whose names you probably recognize were teaching there. Alexander Munro Sr. and Jr., John Bell, John Goodsir, and one Robert Knox. Due to their efforts, Edinburgh became one of the leading centers for anatomical study, a field that was essential to study if you wanted to become a surgeon. Scottish law at the time determined that suitable corpses for use in dissection were those who died in prison, those who took their own lives, and the bodies of foundlings and orphans. The prestige and popularity of medical training at Edinburgh at the time meant that legal supply of bodies couldn't keep up with the demand, so students, lecturers, and grave robbers began a black market trade in exhumed cadavers. Those who took up this grim job became known as the resurrection men. This is where Burke and Hare come in. Now, they didn't start off as resurrection men. Heck, they never really were. Burke started life in 1782 in Ireland as one of two sons of middle-class parents and by all accounts had a comfortable upbringing. He and his brother Constantine joined the military as teens. Burke served in the Donegal militia until he met and married his first wife and settled in County Mayo. However, this marriage was short-lived, and in 1818, after an argument with his father-in-law over some land, Burke deserted his wife and family. He moved to the village of Madison in Scotland, became a laborer, met another woman named Helen, whom he called Nellie, and married her. After the work dried up in Madison, the couple moved to Tanner's Close in Edinburgh. Burke became a cobbler and was by all accounts successful, earning about £1 a week. He was well-liked and described as industrious and good-humored and often entertained his clients by singing and dancing while plying his trade. He grew up Catholic but became Presbyterian and was seldom seen without a Bible. Not a lot is known about the age and birth year of William Hare, but when he was arrested in 1828, he gave his age as 21. Information about Hare's early life is pretty scarce, but it's believed that he was an agricultural laborer before moving to Edinburgh. He lodged in Tanner's Close at the house of a man named Logue and his wife Margaret Laird. When Logue dies in 1826, Hare may have married her. Hare was described as illiterate and uncouth, a lean, quarrelsome, violent, and amoral character with scars about his head and brow. In 1872, Burke was working on a harvest in Midlothian where he met William Hare, and the men became fast friends. When Burke and his wife Nellie returned to Edinburgh, they moved into Hare's Tanner's Close lodging house, and the two couples quickly acquired a reputation for hard drinking and boisterous behavior. On the 29th of November, 1827, a lodger at Hare's house named Donald died of dropsy, now called edema, shortly before getting his quarterly army pension while owing Hare the sum of £4 in back rent. Hare told Burke of his financial loss, and the two decided to sell Donald's body to one of the local anatomists. A carpenter had dropped off a coffin for the burial, which was to be paid for by the local parish. After the carpenter left, Burke and Hare opened the coffin, removed Donald, and filled it with tanner's bark from the local tanners and resealed it. When night fell on the day the coffin was taken for burial, they took the body to Edinburgh University looking for a buyer. According to Burke's testimony, they asked for directions to Professor Munro. However, a student sent them to Knox's office in Surgeon Square. Knox paid the men £7 10 shilling. Hare got £4 to cover Donald's back rent debt that Hare was owed, and Burke kept the remainder. As they left, one of Knox's assistants told Burke and Hare that the anatomists would be glad to see them again when they had another to dispose of. Burke and Hare were over the moon at the sum they'd received for such little work. The pair were eager to make more easy money, and between January of 1828 and October 31st of 1828, they sold the bodies of 16 people that they had killed. Due to the freshness of their victims, they often got between 8 and 10 pounds from Knox per body. They initially chose victims that wouldn't be noticed as missing. Their preferred method for dispatching them was by getting the victims drunk and waiting until they passed out, and then either smothering them with a pillow or holding them down and covering their nose and mouth. Owing to the fact that Burke and Hare were often as drunk as their victims, they finally slipped up and murdered someone that did go noticed by two other lodgers in the house, Anne and James Gray. Later, when they were alone in the house, they found the woman's body in a pile of straw. The pair went to the police, but by the time they got there with the police, Hare had removed the body to Knox's surgery. The police searched and found bloody clothing belonging to the missing woman under the bed, which raised enough suspicion for the police to take Burke and Hare in for questioning. Early the next morning, the police went to Knox's dissecting rooms, where they found the woman, and James Gray identified the woman as having been the one he'd seen drunk with Burke and Hare the previous night. Burke and Hare were held for trial, and Hare turned King's evidence against Burke under immunity from prosecution. Knox faced no charges for the murders because Burke's statement to the police exonerated the surgeon. Public opinion of Knox, however, was another matter. The public saw Knox as a sinister ringmaster who got Burke and Hare to do his dirty work. Several articles were published in the papers stating that he should have been in the dock alongside the murderers, which diminished his reputation in the public. In the wake of the trial, a new word was coined for this type of murder: burking, to smother a victim or to commit an anatomy murder. A rhyme even began circulating around the streets of Edinburgh.
Up the close and down the stair, but ben we'd Burke and Hare. Burke's the butcher, Hare's the thief, Knox the boy that buys the beef.
Burke was found guilty and was sentenced to death, with the judge saying,
"Your body should be publicly dissected and anatomized, and I trust that it is ever customary to preserve skeletons. Yours will be well preserved, in order that posterity may keep in remembrance your atrocious crimes."
Burke was hanged on the morning of January the 28th, 1829, in front of a crowd that was estimated to be as large as 25,000 people, and true to the judge's word, Burke was publicly dissected on February the 1st by Professor Monroe in the Anatomy Theater of the university's Old College. Police had to be called when large numbers of students gathered demanding access to the lecture, for which only a limited number of tickets had been issued. A small riot broke out. Calm was restored when one of the university professors negotiated that they would be allowed to pass through the theater in groups of 50 after the dissection. During the dissection, Monroe dipped his quill pen into Burke's blood and wrote,
"This is written with the blood of William Burke, who was hanged in Edinburgh. This blood was taken from his head."
Burke's skeleton was given to the Anatomical Museum of Edinburgh Medical School, where as of 2024, it still remains. His death mask and a book said to be bound with his tanned skin is on display at Surgeons Hall Museum. And what of Hare? He was released on February 5th of 1829, his extended custody undertaken for his own protection, and was assisted in leaving Edinburgh by train in disguise to Dumfries. At one of the stops along the way, he was recognized. On arrival at Dumfries, a crowd gathered at the hostelry where he was due to stay the night. Police arrived and he was taken into custody for his safety at the town prison. The crowd found out, and windows and street lamps were smashed before 100 special constables were brought in to restore order. In the early hours of the morning, Hare was taken out of town, set free at Annan Road, and told to make his own way to the English border. There were no further reliable sightings of him, and his eventual fate is unknown. So that's the gruesome tale of Burke and Hare. The murders committed by Burke and Hare raised public awareness of the need for bodies for medical purposes and of the trade that doctors had conducted with grave robbers and murderers. This eventually led to the Anatomy Act of 1832, which authorized the dissection of bodies from workhouses that were unclaimed after 48 hours and ended the anatomizing as part of the death sentence for murder. Sadly, this only came about after a high-profile case of the murder of a 14-year-old boy in London led to the investigation of the London Burkers. But that's another tale for another day. Thanks for watching this episode of Raccoon. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell. Also, maybe share it with a friend. If you didn't like it, share it with an enemy. That works too. Liking and subscribing is the best way to support my work, and I truly appreciate and thank you for your support. Remember to be kind to yourself and each other. Come back next week for another interesting tale of the strange, odd, spooky, or true crime. See you in the next one.